I remember wines by the emotion. I think of wines that have an emotional energy. They are living beings. At the end of the day, wine is living, we agree. But it has an emotional energy. And when you find that kind of those sensory nuances and you can bring them to life and describe them for the audience as to why this wine is, a happy kind of, maybe a more exuberant, more, quite loudly, confident wine. And then you match it to the song and to this point in the story, then it all matches up.
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today with Stephanie Morton-Smalls. Introductions in just a second. Hey, have a listen or watch, actually, because I think his animation and the way he speaks is an important part of his story, and that is Zaya Unan. This guy decided that living in Iran was not for him. At 12 years old, worked for a year painting bicycles, earned enough to fly to America and start his life. It is a phenomenal story. It's about an hour and a half long. You won't even know that once you listen to it. You'll freak out. But not while we're here. Here to have a conversation with Stephanie Morton-Smalls. She is a 4 times founder. She is also the founder of a new project called Whisper.
Wine, Whisper, and Song.
Wine, Whisper, and Song. And I want to talk about that. But been around the world in the wine trade. And so I'm so happy to have you on the show. Thanks for coming again.
Thank you very much. It's great to be back.
We're trying to figure out when that was, right?
Yeah, I think it was, you still have Wine of the Month Club. So I think it was right. 2022, was it? That was a lot of fun. It was
still had Wine. Oh, boy. They're selling it again, they think.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I don't know.
Can't keep up with your energy?
I don't know what it is, but they did take 2 of my people, and then one of them lost her job somewhere along the line. The other one's still there, and it's different. She just says different.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you are everything that.
Yeah, I suppose. That's sort of a, this, we'll talk about that in a second, from an entrepreneur standpoint, which is what you're doing. It's sort of a catch-22 to be in that position. My wife and I have discussed this before, and she still thinks we did the right thing, particularly in our trade, because large corporations, I've seen so many companies fail in our industry that tried to upscale themselves and not just stay where they're at. But I'm a merchant. The guy in that picture is a merchant. My father was a merchant by trade. That's the way Armenians think. We're not this global, going to build this giant corporation type people. And this is what has tried to happen, and they've all failed.
They don't understand it when they're coming into the business, when they bought business?
I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Like, look at vintage wine estates. This was 12 or 20 wineries, and every DTC thing you could do, direct-to-consumer business, and went to public, failed. Geerlings and Wade, which was the darling of wine subscriptions back in the day, tried to go into all these different markets, tanked, really tanked. So what was your path so far?
My path, I got into the London wine trade. That was where it all began, I guess. My love for wine started a little earlier, but my time in getting into the business began in London. And that at the time, the UK was the biggest importer of wine in the world, and it's a really dynamic market to be in. And all the wines from around the world were coming into London, because of course at that time there were no English wines, and so it was kind of learning about wine and doing all the exams and having so much fun, like tasting all these magnificent wines from around the world.
Well, England had everything to do with the wine trade, sherry, port, Bordeaux, Burgundy. Those were all, the major markets were England and Russia. So
yeah, absolutely.
I can see why. Is there a wine shop in every corner in London, like in New York?
Yeah, and in those days, yeah, pretty much. And it wasn't online in those days, and there was London didn't have a Wine of the Month club. No. so yeah, it was down to the independent merchants.
Was my calling. I missed that opportunity. What an idiot.
You should have been over there. Yeah.
So what did you do there when you were there?
I was working, really initially I was working in retail, and then quickly went into kind of sales, and then into marketing side of wine and I actually ran the Bulgarian wine group. God, I haven't thought about that for a very long time. I ran
Bulgarian
that
wine group?
Bulgarian wine group, and I managed Plymouth Gin back when it was independent, before it sold. Yeah, so quite a while ago. Probably dating myself there, but
Plymouth Gin, that's a huge brand.
Before it sold, but it's fantastic. One of the original gins, the first gin in a clear bottle. So I was in kind of wine and spirits in London, and then after 3 or 4 years there, I decided I knew I would kind of work around the world, I guess, but I wanted to explore and understand all aspects of the industry. And I went to the country that was, booming and really great at marketing in that time, and that was Australia. So I went without a job, and I went to Australia, and I actually worked vintage at Domaine Chandon, was where I got my hands into it.
Chandon has property in Australia?
Yeah, Domaine Chandon in Yarra Valley. Yeah.
Really?
It's fantastic. That was a fantastic experience. I really appreciate having been able to work with the crew there and to learn so much about winemaking and viticulture at that time. That was brilliant.
So you just like, I'm going to try to cover all my bases in this industry and see where I land? Is that like, or you had an objective? Like, well, none of us have a plan.
Yeah, no, I don't think I went with that plan. I just felt very kind of free in life to kind of carve out my own path. I did feel quite freed up from what society was saying that everyone should do, settle down or get married or have kids or whatever. I was just kind of living it my own way. Yeah. I don't think I designed to do this kind of crazy moving around the world that I've done. I always felt that would suit me maybe, but I didn't have a plan to kind of see it through.
I think it's a really...
I followed my coach.
I would have loved to have done that, to have that experience in this trade. And I think it's so important. I have a young intern that used to work here. Now she's in Bordeaux. She went to enology school for her first year, and I got her job at Chateau Bailly. And I'm jealous, even though she's 19, but I'm jealous because I would have loved to be able to do that and understand those cultures. Do you think that's part of... I just wrote a story. While you walked in, I was writing a story about May Eliane Langsong, the famed Comtesse de Pichon-Longueville, the actual Comtesse.
Yeah.
And she's talking about protecting Jewish families during the German occupation.
Yeah.
And my comment is, isn't that part of the terroir? Isn't your history in this industry, bouncing around, doing these things, part of your personal terroir to how you approach this?
That's a beautiful way of describing it. Never heard that before, but yeah. And I think this industry, I mean, knowing wine the way we do, you can either explore wine through a glass and taste the world, as I've said this to you before, but as you used to do here every single day, you'd be tasting your way around the world, or you can embark, early on a desire to kind of explore the world through wine. And I think both of those options are beautiful. And I think the earlier you start to move around the world, the more you experience, and you experience at different ages, and it's a beautiful industry for that, and it's very welcoming. I think the wine industry is very welcoming, and I particularly enjoy all the different cultures. We were just talking about Armenia.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. Of all the places in the world that I haven't been to, and there's very few countries, I guess, now, but the one place I really want to go is Armenia, and what's happening there is, I think, one of the most exciting things in the wine world today, I'm
going to send you
and the oldest of the oldest in the of the wine world.
Yeah, well,
ancient.
They'll all make that argument that they're battling it out with Georgia, but I'm going to send you a reel I made because I was there and I shot 3 days with one of the TV stations.
Oh, great!
And it came out this. It was pretty cool piece.
Love to see it.
I like this idea. Taste your way around the world, and that's not spoken about much. But of course, you went to Australia, had to learn a new language. So, or a new accent.
I think they took the Mickey out of my accent, but they make a lot of fun out of the English. But
and then you went to Argentina.
I did, yeah. That was fantastic.
Why?
Why? The Swiss owners of a world-class wine estate in Argentina, they were just starting it up. It was built, the vineyard was established, and they wanted somebody to come in and manage the commercial side of the property and take it from development to launch. And I took it to being what was in the top 100 wines of the world with Wine Spectator. So I was there for a long time managing Finca de Cero. I was there actually for 5 years, located in Mendoza in Argentina. And then I managed, I moved to London because it was more central to kind of racing around the world. And then ultimately, I was still managing Finca de Cero when I moved to California recently.
So would you say then, because I think not only did you have an important rounding of your fingers in the industry, being retail and then marketing and then Bulgarian wines, which is very funny because we've done some here, and there's a couple in the market still. Manufacturing in Australia, sparkling. That now, what would you call yourself? Consultant?
That's an interesting question. Right now, I call myself an entrepreneur of a startup, an innovative new way of a new experience in wine that hasn't been done quite in this way before in Wine Whisper and Song.
So let's talk about that, the innovation.
It pulls in the different aspects.
Innovation, this trade. You just talked about Armenia, 6,100-year-old winery they found there, and so you can make that argument. It's probably the same product as it was today, except it's not as refined. But certainly, the idea of grapes being fermented into a beverage that represents something other than that, actually. What does that innovation mean to you then?
I think innovation, you can have innovation where, I crafted the first time augmented reality was combined with animation film and
wine?
Yeah, and the Owl and the Dust Devil back in 2017. So that was
Before Criminal?
It was just coming at the same time, but this involved a whole animation film in the whole kind of coming forward into life. So that was fascinating, and it was bringing tech into an industry which is not so tech driven. And I think what I mean about innovation with Wine Whisper and Song is just coming about an experience and doing it in a different way. It's not the first time that emotion and wine pairing has come into our vocabulary, and certainly right now there's a big chorus about discussing wines with regards to emotions much more. But it's the first time this blend of experience has come into fruition.
That's kind of interesting because emotion, it's an emotional decision when you go to the store to buy wine. Stories are very funny, and I won't bore you with them now, but it is an emotional decision. But this is a different kind of emotion. You're talking about sharing an emotion of song and wine in a specific environment. Tell me about what this is.
Yeah, so Wine Whisper and Song involves powerful storytelling. At the core of it, there's an inspiring talk with powerful storytelling, and it meets original songs of the speaker-songwriter and is paired with wine. So an experience will be an inspiring talk on mindfulness, awareness, intentional living. And it's by a speaker-songwriter, myself, or other ones that I have. Rhonda Ross, daughter of Diana Ross and Berry Gordy. She is also one of the other speakers. And it's having an inspiring talk. And then at 3 different moments within the experience, at a pivotal story moment, really maximum kind of emotion happening there in the storytelling of this aha moment, this life's adventures and that's meant. A pause for a song from of an original song and matched with a wine. So the wine, if I think back to the wines I've tasted, and probably the same for you, is that I remember wines by the emotion. I think of wines that have an emotional energy. They are living beings. At the end of the day, wine is living. We agree, but it has an emotional energy, and when you find that kind of those sensory nuances, and you can bring them to life and describe them for the audience as to why this wine is a happy kind of, maybe a more exuberant, more, quite loudly, confident wine.
Sure.
And then you match it to the song and to this point in the story, then it all matches up. And then the person is absorbing this wine and imbibing this wine whilst resonating on many different levels, all the senses and deeply emotionally. And I look back on the wines that I remember from my lifetime, and they are the ones which have most connected emotionally with me, or the emotions that I was feeling at the time. I remember.
Is this a new language?
I don't think it is. You know what? I think it's the original language. I mean, it's not a question of why are we talking about emotion and wine pairing. The question should be is why are we not? I mean, you think about the language that we've been talking. People, in the industry. I mean, I love talking about the technical details of wines, but we can't get our knickers in a twist because somebody doesn't understand the difference between powdery, dappled, or gauzy tannins. You know what I mean? And also, we've come to reference wines in relation to flavors,
right?
But flavors and food is not a universal language. The enjoyment of food, yes, is a universal appreciation, but food is, geographically, changes and ingredients change. And therefore you might talk to somebody about blueberries, to somebody else they might have a hint of, the smell of an acacia tree, and somebody else might be talking about tamarind. I mean, it's not a global language, whereas the global language which we as human beings were born with is emotions. Emotions has been there from the start. And so to pair wines with emotions is almost more natural than what we've been doing. And it also invites, instead of explaining a wine in technical detail, it's about experiencing a wine. And that's much more profound. And I think that stays with people a lot longer.
That's really interesting. And if my face looks blank, it's not because I don't understand, I get it. But I'm thinking through some of these things I've been reading about and some of these, generations that are trying to, for instance, and I use a new language as the question, they want to change the language of wine. And I don't make any sense to me. But the language I speak is different. My dad used to cringe at some of the stuff I would say because I grew up in a different era than he did in the wine world. He grew up with Michael Broadbent and Harry Waugh and that kind of talk. Yeah, right. And then in the wine trade. And then I do something. And now they want to change it. And they want to talk about Captain Crunch and Fruit Loops descriptors. And I want to tell these young adults, like, the next generation is not going to understand what you're talking about, and I don't understand what you're talking about. So that changing the language of wine does nothing. But this might be that change because emotions are less, they're more understandable between humans. Yeah. And then Gerard Bertrand told me in our podcast that, there's a life vibration in the wine. Yeah. That led me to a new concept of when people talk about tension in a wine. And I think that is the tension in a wine. And so when you're saying that emotion gets stirred up, is that vibration and that tension that you're sensing. And you don't know what it is necessarily. You don't know why it is, which is another great thing about wine is that they can tell us how nutrients get into the roots, but they don't know why they get into the roots and why they create this tension and this vibration. That is the mystery of wine. So what do you do with this concept?
So this concept is great for wineries, and I'm just launching it now. I have actually done some pre-launch events, which were phenomenally well received, and the feedback of the wines resonating with them and the experience actually. A woman came up to me and she said, this is the experience I didn't even know I needed. And I was like, okay, yeah, wow. This resonates. So
that's
I know, I was loving it. But I think it's great for wineries that want a new experience to stand out in their region for their tasting rooms, and they can spark fresh conversations with new audiences or with wine club members that they want to get into a whole new conversation with. It taps into top trends, of well-being and intentional living, mindfulness, and speaker-led social events. I mean, that's like 2025 is all about that, So I think it's great for wineries. It's ideal for resorts in wine country, and I'm talking to a couple at the moment. So that would be a great way to spotlight their wine program, because the wines are always focused on the location and are brought from the winery or the location that I'm pairing with. And then I think one aspect I'm really excited about, and I'm not sure who's going to be the first to launch this part of the concept, is I think it would be a great pre-dinner event. So if you had a private dining room, so, a restaurant with a private dining room, and it could be in wine country or it could be in one of the major cities, but to have a pre-dinner for 1 hour, inspiring talk with songs and emotion and wine pairing, and these 3 wines really showing up and resonating with people with these different emotions. And then with those same 3 wines, take them into the dinner, and I would continue with chef, and we experience the 3 wines when paired with emotions, and then the 3 wines when paired over dinner, and just explore how that changes and how people's subjectivity, changes with regards to the wines or with regards to their appreciation and understanding of the wine. And I think that could be a beautiful concept.
I think that would be a huge change. Instead of, in other words, sarcastically, instead of standing there going, in 1385, I had a podcast with a wonderful historian of wine, but I thought to myself, oh my God, you're going to kill people. Stand up there in front of dinner and saying, that Madame Clicquot in 1769. I mean, that's a pretty crazy. And I'm just thinking about this. Part of this current movement and innovation, the word innovation, and is dealing with packages and Tetra Paks and things that aren't really related to the experience of wine. I was talking about Chateau Bailly, what she's done there, the way they've built their new winery. It's an experience to go there. You come away understanding the wine because of the experience. I was just writing about May Elliott Le Terroir, about May Elliott en Languedoc. For sure, the Pichon Longueville people, it's built into their DNA now that they had this experience during the war. And it has to, the emotion has to come out in the wine.
Yeah.
It's not a piece of tannin, but it's certainly a philosophy about what you put in the bottle. And now the experience of wine, which has always been the case. My dad had dinners, this Les Amis de Vin thing was an experience of wine. People came and they wear their minks and they'd have these dinners, and Robert Mondavi would speak, is what I think is coming back to, I'm not going to say, I won't stick my neck out and say it's going to regenerate the wine business, but I think the experience of wine needs to be developed in this way. And I just wrote down a couple of notes. One guy in Cortona, Italy, who I met, has a jewelry store in Kansas City. Figure that one out.
Strange.
Yeah, right? In a jewelry store in Cortona.
Yeah.
But he does these events called Wine, Dine, and Shine, and you show up.
Fabulous.
And you put up, and he consigns you a piece of faux jewelry, big thing, and everybody sits around, talks about the food and the wine and what they're wearing. And then they can buy that jewelry on the way out the door if they want to. And I thought that was fabulously fun. In non-wine part of the country, Kansas, where wine is a new thing.
Yeah, that's a different way to come at wine as well, yeah.
Rex Pickett, the author of Sideways, who admittedly was dying on the vine after the movie because he got none of it, is now a phenom in in Napa. People go to wineries now to hear him and hang out with him.
Yeah.
This is a resurgence of the experience of wine. What does it mean?
But that's what people are wanting. I mean, it's, you look at Rob McMillan from Silicon Valley Bank or any of the major thought leaders in the wine industry right now as to where is our next step. We just need to listen to what the audiences are telling us. The audiences are saying we want meaningful, emotionally engaging experiences. They don't even ask for wine. They want meaningful, emotionally engaging experiences. And then bring the wine into it as part of it, not necessarily lead with it. And if we can listen to what people today want, it doesn't mean that any of the nuances are any less important. Trust me, I am so deep in the beauty of wine and the technical and the details, and I love all of that. But engaging people first and then letting them explore that second is what we are being told by the younger generations is the way that they want to come into anything. And it's not just about wine. They want experiences. And I think as we approach these newer audiences and at this time in the wine industry when it's so critical to bridge these new the new generation, should we say, is giving them what they are literally asking for. That's as simple as it gets. And the thing is, I was thinking, because I knew I was coming to talk to you, and I was thinking yesterday, how far different is this than what we did? It's not. If you think about it, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but for me, I was seduced by wine first.
That's not my job. That's my wife's job.
Okay.
Go ahead.
After your wife.
Yeah.
The other person that can seduce you. It's the wine. But for me, I was seduced by wine first. And I continue to be seduced by the wine first. Not every wine, but I'm seduced by the wine first. Then I go and explore and find out, okay, well, hang on a sec. Which vineyard did it come from? Which site? What was the soil type? What's going on with the winemaking or what's going on in the vineyard? But I explore the details second and I get seduced first. So It's so strange in a way that we've been... we spent decades educating people into loving wine, whereas they're asking. They don't need to be explained; they want to experience it, and it's no different to what we did. Why are we thinking now? And I'm making this in the broadest possible terms, but why are we saying actually you need to understand a wine to fall in love with it? No, let people fall in love with something. People don't fall in love with facts. People fall in love with the way something makes them feel, the same way we did. And we just need to let people be seduced and be inspired by wine before giving them all the detail. The details are always there. All the complexity, the nuances, the technicality is always there to be explored. But they don't need to pass a test to fall in love. I think we just need to, as we're looking at these new generations, it's not just about the new generations, it's that, I think there's a lot of people asking for something different. And even if, Napa and Sonoma and the main wine regions, they do a fantastic job of offering up an array of different experiences as much as possible. But there's a lot of emphasis on the typical wine tasting or museum version of that tasting. And then sometimes there might be a concert or something like that, or a way just to come and drink and be involved with the winery. But how about coming up with new experiences that are experience-led, emotionally engaging, meaningful about life, And I think with regards to Wine Whisper and Song, it actually mirrors what wine is. If you think about wine, it's from the vineyard to the glass, vineyard to the glass. Yes. It is about philosophies, intuitive actions, intentional thinking, and make a mindful awareness in every aspect that blends to inspire greatness. And Wine Whisper and Song actually embodies that same ethos in Inspiration for Life. It's about, an inspiring talk about life, about living, and about aha moments and life's adventures in a beautifully entertaining way. And then that being an inspiration for greatness in life. So
I don't want to sound condescending and think that you didn't come up with something great, but it sounds to me that this is just an extension of a nice dinner time conversation, and meaning. Yeah, it's very interesting to me because the generations we're talking about, we don't want to hear about your father's and your mother's interpretation of wine and that they tasted wine. We don't care if you smell blackberries or blueberries. We want the experience like you're talking about. My kids are all millennials, and they'd rather spend $100 on a sushi meal than save for a Mustang. That's just the way they are, and that's fine. But as intimidating as wine is, I don't care what level of expertise I'm sitting with a glass of wine. If it's good, honest wine, if it's really made to represent something, it's never intimidating to those people. No, because the conversation becomes very colloquial and very cool and very if they want to know the answers to the questions, they have the answer, because eventually they ask, and I think you're saying this, why is this doing this to me?
Let them ask in their own measure. I think what you're saying is that you're not pushing them with that information. You're happy to that, and that's the way you are. But I think in the industry as a whole, we've leaned a lot into defining different wines within our own portfolios as well. This is from this vineyard, and this, defining price points sometimes and defining why it's in existence, as opposed to trying to connect the wine with other aspects or with other ways of understanding the wine.
I think that's accurate. We're going to Napa the next week.
Oh, fantastic.
I rarely taste when I go there. We go to eat and I podcast usually. But somebody invited me to a winery to experience the tour and the tasting, and I'm interested to see what this take is. Now, I don't know the people. I've never met them. I don't know their story, so I'm going to find that out.
Yeah.
But we did visit last time we were up Catillard, which is the Napa owned property by the chateau owners of Chateau Smith Lafitte, Pays-Leon. And these were two. Now, I find this really fascinating for me. These are two French people that are now in their probably late 70s, but they met on the slopes on the French national ski team, right? And they had this great story.
Adrenaline-packed story.
And it goes back before that with the family grocery store and all that. And I find that really fun. It's a fun thing when you taste the wine. You go, wow, this is a really fun story about these people that did this. And they do that. We can't expect everybody to want to do what we do. I didn't fall in love with wine. I went to my father in 1988 and he goes, I'm going to sell the company. Maybe you ought to check it out. And I said, okay. I was having trouble with my partners at the time in the software company. And so I went and packed wine for 3 months. And
then what happened when you tasted it?
I was, I worked, there's that picture from 1975.
Yeah.
I worked in a liquor store. I was in the beer box most of the time. And I was coming off of corporate America, and then the smallest company you could ever want to start, with a fishbowl full of business cards and a 2-line phone. We didn't have an office even. In fact, the first objection I ever got from the first sale, the guy goes, "You don't even have an office, do you?" I'm like, "No, we don't."
Yeah.
And so it didn't hit me as to what I was providing a service to people for until much later, maybe 10 to 15 years.
Really, that long? Yeah.
I was a mail order marketer, man. I was standing at a booth selling this idea of a subscription to wine, and was the most important part. It was
you were managing you were getting on with the managing of the business, as opposed to
right. I was a businessman. And it was a correspondence course in wine, really.
Yeah.
If back then, not today, these subscription models, at least a lot of them, I'm not going to say it categorically, but they're not about exposing people to interesting things and finding this Trader Joe's 2,000 bottles of some Sebastiani Cabernet Franc somewhere. It was about, that's what we were about. Now it's about how cheap you can buy it and how much you can sell it for. So I'm fascinated with this idea. And I'll tell you why. There's another one. There's a master of wine, Susan Lin. You ever heard of her? She's in Napa or Washington. And she is a concert pianist. Yeah. And she's, as well as Vanessa Conlon, who was the buyer for Wine Access for a while. Yeah. She's a opera singer.
Yeah.
But Susan Lin has been playing with this idea of music and wine.
Yeah. And this is not the first time that music and wine has been brought together. And it's a beautiful artistic, it's almost like, wine is the meeting of art and science. And I think a lot of people in wine have a musical bent as well. So, there's a lot of wineries talking about wine in musical terms. And I think
you've turned that into an experience. Yeah, between the 2 and 3 actually with food.
Yes, and actually, really, it's the inspiring talk and the powerful storytelling to drive the emotion, and then having the song match up to the song. In my talks, literally the lyrics match the story. I literally, the most profound words I've written about some of the things that I've lived through I've put into song, and therefore, when you have that, banking up against the story itself, and then you taste a wine that is like really the essence of that emotion, it becomes a very powerful kind of triad of parts. And
that's the interesting thing. I was reading. What I like to do is I go back to the magazine of this group.
Yeah,
This guy was a brilliant guy. I'll tell you the story off camera because it's crazy. but I read articles from the 70s and the 60s. And there's an article, I'm going to send it to you, that the guy wrote a score around some wine.
Yeah.
And I sent it to my friend who's a conductor. I haven't heard him play it yet, but I want to hear your take on it after you read the article. And there's this score.
Oh, I'd love to.
That goes with it. And it's from 1975 or something. So you're right. It's not a new concept.
No.
So, but your concept's new to emote, to get people to emote.
Yeah.
Is this like a conversation too? Like I'm having dinner and the guys, you're playing the music?
I mean, it doesn't necessarily happen during dinner. This would be an experience, either a pre-dinner experience or it'd be in the afternoon at a winery tasting room. And it's a way. I think the standalone talk is powerful. I mean, Rhonda Ross. She's the daughter of Berry Gordy and Diana Ross, as I just said, but she's also a Grammy-nominated songwriter, Emmy-nominated actress, and she's also a TED fellow nominee. So the level of talks by herself, myself, and some others coming on board are really amazing talks on subjects of mindfulness, intentional living. So on that piece alone, it's powerful. But then to have these 3 interludes when, songs that the person that's talking has actually written the song, really coming in and adding this power piece, and then the wine to match in that moment is so digestible. And what a lovely way to spend an hour. It's not like you're just sitting there listening to somebody, and it's not preachy. It's aha moments, and I when I was doing the kind of pre-launch events, it reminded me of something somebody said to me a very long time ago, decades ago. Somebody said to me that one of my skills is moving people on an emotional journey. And this effectively this is a curated emotional journey. And there's one moment on one of my talks, it's called Intuition Talks. And the second pivotal story is a very emotionally charged story. It's a moment of massive gravitas in my life. And it's a very meaningful moment. And I had tears in my eyes when I was explaining, and even my voice broke, but I looked and the people in the audience had tears in their eyes listening. And then, wow. I shared the song relating to this story, and I paired this wine, which had a lot of complexity to it and depth. And then we went on, and a couple of minutes later, after that song and wine experience, we'd gone back to the talk, and I'm talking, but then I'm moving on with the talk, and I'm into a new story, and I'm laughing out loud, and the audience is laughing out loud.
Wow.
And that's the beauty of great storytelling. Is this is a whole very carefully curated arc of a journey whereby you can be like, in one moment, and then the next moment you can be laughing, and that's what makes it beautiful. This isn't like a just sit there and hear somebody preach whatsoever. This is something where people want to go back, even hear the same talk again, because the stories change and obviously the wines change every time. So every single Wine Whisperer song is actually a unique experience.
That's kind of interesting, because I've sat down before, people have asked me to pair food and chocolate, whatever, and I was on TV, blah, blah. And my initial responses were lousy. It's like I thought, this is chocolate with pasilla peppers. I know what's going to go with that. And I tasted it. It's like, that didn't work. It's something off the wall worked. Do you have to figure out, or does it come to you while you're writing these things or producing these events or the concept? Does the wine pop into your head like, oh, this is obviously a Tannat from Uruguay? Or do you have to sort of think about it?
The concept depends on me doing pre-work with the winery. So if it's going to be located at a certain winery, I'll work with them in advance to see maybe what message they want to highlight. Maybe they want to show, because emotions is a very good way of showing up differences in wines. Mm-hmm. Now we're all about, okay, well, this comes from this site and that's why it's different from that one, which is slightly warmer or whatever else. But if you say, well, this is, an exuberant, happy wine, whereas this has got layers of complexity and
I get that.
Is sitting back and think. So when you start to do that, it's a great showcase of 3 different vineyards or 3 different varieties or 3 different winemaking styles. So I work with the winery beforehand to identify which wines. And then, of course, when the people leave, they can buy a mixed case of the Wine Whisperer and Song wines. They get the wine and the song. They get the playlist as they go. And it's so immediately digitally shareable with their friends as they can go. And the people that I've done the ones with separately before launching at the wineries, they've gone, and I can see that they've played the playlist, and they might not remember my name, but you can bet they'll say, my gosh, there was this woman, she was saying this story, and oh my God, there was this moment, and then this happened, and they'll remember that,
crying.
and they'll remember start crying, but they'll remember the wine, and they'll remember the story. They might not remember my name, and that's not important in this, but they need to remember the feeling of what it makes them feel. Because it's when you have that feeling, they're the wines that you remember. I remember certain wines across decades. I will never forget those wines that in certain moments when I had a really strong feeling, that they're etched indelibly on my mind forever. And that's in this world where there's so many wines in the world, and wine club members are beautifully fickle, How do we get them to remember our wine? How do we have them remembering that and telling that story in 2-3 months' time or later? And Wine Whisperer and Song offers that opportunity to really have something imprinted on somebody, not just somebody's mind, but on somebody's soul. It's less tech talk and it's more soul stirring.
It's kind of interesting because you're flying in the face of going to the Napa Valley wine tasting room, because so many wine tasting room workers don't understand that part, and so they're pouring off. They're talking about the stuff that everybody now is saying is why wine is suffering. But I'm not sure if I agree with that completely. But what you are doing is bringing home in a simple, less expensive, less complicated way to do what normally happens, like when you travel, like. You go to Italy and you're sitting in front of the Parthenon and you have this house Trattoria red and you think it's the best wine you've ever had because the emotions around sitting there are unique to that moment. And then you come home and you taste the wine and you go, I didn't taste the same. Right? That happens all the time.
But the emotion and the wine got locked in your mind, and you remember that wine enough to come back and order it when you came back. So that is exactly what I'm talking about. And none of this negates the beauty of the complex and more nuanced messages about site and tannins and structure and all of that. I'm just saying this is an alternative way to engage with people that is very in demand in the moment.
But that stuff's always there. Right?
Yeah.
You could,
that's always there to explore.
Yeah,
exactly.
If you want to explore, wine is available for you to do it. You can read all the books that you got here.
Yeah.
I've got at least 100 wine books at home. And when I'm interested in a subject, I go pull one out and read about it. And that's for me to know. Yeah. But you don't have to know that stuff. No. You just have to know how it makes you feel.
Exactly. And then after that, you might dig deeper. That's the idea is if you get people emotionally engaged, that's when they'll dig deeper. And that's what all the wineries want. And that's fine. But let's emotionally engage everyone first. I mean, it's just it's just doing it the same way that we did it. I look back on life and on the wines that I've remembered. It was that way first. It was being seduced by the wine and having that emotional connection first. And then going and exploring and doing all, and I've done all the, the wine exams and, and the books but it was that way round. And so it's just allowing new audiences to do what we did.
It's kind of interesting. I had this thought and theory, and I think it's reasonably accurate, particularly with supermarket wines. In fact, my employee who went with the new company sent me a sample of the last shipment.
Yeah.
And I'm of Armenian descent, and there was a Turkish wine in here, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. But
how did that go?
and I thought, I want to taste this because I've never tasted a Turkish wine after all these years. And it was palatable, but it was sugared up also, right? And the sugar is like the most cloying thing that it doesn't express anything except sugar. And there's actually a study being done where people get tired of that pro forma. Eventually they move on to the things. I guess that's why white Zinfandel drinkers is one of the other things, and it's as we move down the line. But the point I'm making is, it seems like everybody can agree when they taste a wine that expresses something.
Yeah.
Where it's from. And I always ask winemakers when they come in here, so what's the end game? You're doing all this. You're experimenting with grapes. You're changing the barrels. You're fermenting cold. Or whatever you're doing. What's the goal of all that? And ultimately, it boils down to express this time in this place, right? And I think your premise is basically that you are providing wines that you've produced or calculated to express an emotion, and feel like an emotion, and that we want you to feel this too when I'm done with it, and that's what kind of what it is in the first place, is an expression of. And I think everybody agrees when they taste that good glass of wine, they go, yeah, maybe they don't like the character of it, like the flavors, but they sense this tension and they sense this vibration that you're bringing out to a human level, really.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So when is this launch, you're thinking?
Well, I'm talking to a few wineries right now, so we'll see. I'm not sure which one's going to line up as being the first in the timeline, but in the next few weeks. So it's all happening right now. So
that was just what you talked about. Was it Diana Ross's was it?
Diana Ross and Berry Gordy's daughter. Who's Rhonda Ross, and she's one of the speaker-songwriters in Wine Whispering Song.
Berry Gordy being the founder of Motown.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
There's a big movement of fine wine, in professional sports. Now, for much of my career, there's always endorsed wines. Fred Couples, the famed golfer, was the first wine I tasted that was actually sort of participating in it. Greg Norman, of course, she's got a whole brand, and his daughter runs. But there's been a huge movement in professional basketball, for instance, for fine wine, to the extent that the Lakers, when they're done with their game, they call Boa Steakhouse in Marina Del Rey or wherever it is, Santa Monica, and they say, we're coming over and get some ribeyes going, and we want these bottles. There's a huge appreciation. Is that, since you're at that level of entertainer, is wine a cultural part of Hollywood or music and singing and generally?
I mean, a lot of people have amazing fine wine cellars, and that's for sure. And they might be cellars for showcase, or they might have an in-depth understanding of the wines in their cellar. I think there's can go both ways.
Yes, to cellar owners. Look what I have, and they're like, why? I don't know.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of different ways that can go, but and that's a great way to experience this as well in a private event, and pair up some of your wines from your cellar in Wine Whispering Song as well. Yeah, but there are some fantastic cellars, not just in LA. I mean, in across. I think across the US, people have developed cellars over the last number of years. Yeah.
Like somebody says, why do you have so much wine, Paul? And I'm like, because the guy didn't buy it for me. And that's what I was fortunately stuck with it.
And I'm drinking it.
So here's a fun experiment for you. And we're
you're going to do it?
Actually,
you did one of these.
48 minutes already. This is kind of down the road of what you're talking about, because it talks about, this is of a doctor in France. His name is Dr. Murray. He's long past, but he wrote a book called Wine is the Best Medicine. It's sort of like what is in the wine that makes you feel something or helps you fix something.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to, now don't worry about getting this right or wrong, because literally anybody sat in your chair you're sitting in, it's 33% chances that they get it right.
I know. You asked me last time.
Last time?
It was fantastic. Maybe I'll get the same question
do it again.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
So, right.
I'm all up for that.
So you're further along in your career, maybe.
Maybe I'll have the right answer this time.
Gee, I wish I should have played it back.
See which one. I know. No, this is going to get you. So what's the question?
And these are all French wines.
Okay, go.
So the question is, let's call it anemia. I don't think I've ever asked anybody that. So okay. You could have a dry champagne, a Grave, or a Côte de Beaune to heal anemia. And there's, of course, a dosage with this. Let's see. What
are we going to go for? Iron in the soil? Where are we going to stem the answer from?
Let's go to the emotions. When do you have anemia? What's your emotion?
I feel pretty deflated and lacking energy,
right.
I think is what I'd be doing. Where I'd be at. So if that was my
You're actually on the right track. You already said the right thing.
Iron in the soil?
Part of it. You said part of the right thing.
Well, if I was deflated and feeling a lack of buzz, then I'd probably go for the champagne. But with the iron in the soil, let's go with the Grave.
Well, you're 33%, man. You're born of the 33%. You got it right. And it says exactly that. Anemia, or the pathological decrease in the number of red blood cells, manifests itself in a variety of disorders, among them fatigue, vertigo, and a lack of general tone.
Yeah.
Is sometimes hemorrhage.
Yep.
And it says grave, and it says because of their iron content.
Yeah.
The vine that produces this type of wine is cultivated on pure sand containing iron particles in a soluble form.
Yeah. See, now that's where it pays. If you're going to be on your podcast that's where it pays to know the technical details of the soil and the vineyard. So those years of knowing the tech details does pay off in certain circumstances. I'm just saying that sometimes emotions can be a way into that.
It is.
You're going to give me another one?
It's 2 glasses of meal, which I certainly qualify there.
I could get that done.
I must be anemic.
I'm cured.
If we work backwards, I have 2 glasses of meal of grave, so I must be anemic.
Yeah.
Such a pleasure to have you back on the phone,
Thank you
Stephanie.
for having me back here. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Good to be back.
Topanga. There's some vineyards in Topanga, right?
Oh. And in Malibu Canyon and even in Agua Hills. Yeah, there's things happening over there.
What's her name? Sandy Garber, who owns one of the wine distributors. She's actually survived all this. Garber Associates, actually. She lives in Topanga. I'm surprised you haven't crossed her path. Because
there's not that many people in Topanga.
Quite well known in a long time.
Yeah.
So with all this consolidation of distributors in Los Angeles and RNDC walking in September, and it's a crazy world right now.
It is a crazy world, and one that a lot of people, as somebody said in the industry, there's a lot of great talent out there in the California industry right now, and a lot of companies are stepping up to employ that talent. So I'm hopeful that I've got so many friends affected by that move, but that they'll land in all the great places, I'm sure.
I feel vindicated. I sold right at the right time.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Paul, you got this sussed. You know this.
Cheers.
Fantastic.
Thank you.